Hello everybody! I wanted to make a video where I took a look at the game's meta over the years. So in this video I will try to cover as much information as possible, however you must be aware that this topic isn't really one that is documented. The best I could find before doing research was this Reddit post from 6 years ago and the fandom website that contains the update history of the game. And my memory of the time, I suppose. What I am trying to say is that this video may be somewhat incomplete, so if you feel like something or some deck is missing from the video, make sure to leave a comment, and if it turns out I missed a lot, I will make a pinned comment where I will write some notes and try to credit you. With that said, let's take a look at the meta of the game. For the meta, it is hard to say if the game really had a meta, since obviously there must have been a deck that was better than other decks, but with the game having changes often, or at least often compared to today, cards and mechanics changed often. So instead of pointing out a specific deck for this part, I will point out some things that changed which were relevant to the game before. For instance, heroes used to have only their signature superpower by default and some mediocre smaller superpowers alongside it. Satan was removed. P-Shooter and Zombie were the ones for every class instead of each class having a unique plant/zombie based underclass. Now let's get into actual decks. The first set's meta was pretty obvious since the deck is still usable nowadays, and that is Brainstorm Trickster or Brainstorm Bulk. I'll focus on Brainstorm Trickster first. One of the main reasons why Trickster was so good back then is that there wasn't that many cards that punished the zombie hero for trying to play tricks, because Forget-Me-Nots and Dragon Fruit didn't exist yet. So the best options were Black-Eyed Pea, which didn't really answer Trickster since Trickster decks basically always ran Rocket Science, or Banana, which also didn't really answer it since it just kinda delayed it. Another reason why the deck was so good is that back then Brainstorm used to have Electrobolt, which is a way better superpowers than Dance Off. As for Brainstorm Bulk, it was probably the worst of the two decks, since actually drawing it at the start was way more important back then than nowadays, because you would usually lose if you didn't draw it early. Still, when you did get it early, it was pretty overpowered. To charge Bulk, you just play Deadbeard and Fireworks, and then all you had to do was teleport, then Bulk, and finally a bonus attack. A pretty easy 6-brain combo. Now, before you ask, Bulk Trickster Hybrid was not really a thing, and the main reason for that is that there wasn't enough support for both win conditions in a single deck. Another good deck was Gravestones with Pogo and Mog, which was a lot better back then since the only grave removal was the 2-cost Gravebuster, and cards like Cool Bean and Blockbuster didn't exist. Now, as for the plant meta, I don't really remember what decks were good back then, but the consensus seems to be that Pineclone was pretty good, which makes sense since the only semi-good answer was Chickening and it didn't even kill the Pineclones. However, we will talk a bit more about Pineclone in the next set, since that is the set when it went crazy. Other decks I remember seeing was an old version of Grass Knuckles Tempo, where you played Black-Eyed Pea, Buffroom, and Bananasaurus. Also worth mentioning that Lily of the Valley came out around this time, and it was pretty good in that deck, well, at least before it got nerfed. Before getting into the decks, while doing research for this video I noticed that this set apparently came out less than a year after the game came out, which was honestly surprising to me since I remember feeling like it took over a year coming out, but that may have been since I counted the time the game was in beta. Anyways, a lot of cards came out just straight up broken, so let's just list the decks quickly. First off, for the plants, Pineclone. If it was good in set 1, it became broken in set 2. With Mushroom Grotto costing only 2 sun, spamming mushrooms and then playing Pineclone was unironically a good strategy. Plus, Molekale also came out this set and it was just another plus for Pineclone. Briar Rose was also buffed this update, so Briar Rose flower spam also became meta. It was sometimes also combined with Heal, which was also pretty busted at this time, especially with Venus Flytrap Planet, healing you even if the plant dried? Healing you even if the plant died. Not to mention Hardichoke, which I am pretty certain triggered the heal effect of Flytrap Planet even if it died. I remember at this time running Wall Knight with both Solar Winds and Flytrap Planet because that is just how busted they were. Plus Hardichoke is a flower. Also, Astrobera. OG Cycle Cap also happened this update and it was pretty busted since Planet of the Grapes was a 2-cost and Magic Beans actually did something. Another deck that is worthy of mention is Clickpea, since the original version of Clickpea didn't have the effect where it costed 1 more per Clickpea played, so you can probably imagine how busted it was, especially considering that it is still decent today. There is probably another plant deck I am forgetting, but for now let's just move on to the zombies. I actually don't really remember what decks were really meta for zombies during set 2, even after doing research, with research being scrolling through old frame up videos. As far as I can tell, Trickster Brainstorm got a bit better with more support cards, but not that much since there were also more counters. Bad Moon Rising also came out during this time, and with old Medulla Nebula, that card, there were some decent ramp decks. Although some would say that Medulla, oh my god, was better with other cards. There were also some World Loader decks that were pretty strong and some Conjure decks, but then again I'm not sure if I would call those decks meta. Actually, I wanted to insert something here that I either thought or heard a long while ago, which is that zombies were definitely meta in set 1, but plants were definitely the meta during set 2. Anyways, if you have a meta deck around this time you remember that I missed, leave a comment I suppose, but for now let's just move on to the next set. Okay, so before I start talking about meta decks, I just want to point out that some of the decks mentioned before are still good / usable at this point, but I will mostly just focus on the new decks since I think that is more interesting. I will however mention if a deck got even better somehow with the new set, like for example Cycle Cap. When set 3 came out, some of the cards in the deck got nerfed, but at the same time Lima came out, not to mention that Puffshroom, the 0-cost card, also came out this set. Also worth mentioning Aggro Solar Flare, which I'm not sure if I'd say it was really meta back then, but Firewit being originally a 2-cost 3/3 was pretty busted, plus Elderberry came out in the same set, and Astrocado came out in the previous set. By the way, Triceratops came out this update, so Tempo Grass Knuckles was back in meta. On the zombie side, the obvious deck to mention is Stompadum card draw. Stompadum used to be a 3-cost card, so it was easier to play, especially since there weren't that many decent cards to answer a 2/4 on turn 3. Also, since it costed less, you could basically just spam them one after the other and have a buff Stompadum instantly in the next turn. Not to mention that you could spam going barrel after getting a couple of minions onto the board. Another deck worth mentioning is Bulk Brainstorm yet again, since Gunman used to be a 1/4 for some godforsaken reason, and regifting Zombie costed 2 brains. They were good for that deck since they dealt a lot of damage early on, and were pretty much a must remove for the plant hero, which would buff your Valkyrie. It was so strong that you could win games without even getting Valkyrie. Finally, Zombot. You just teleported it in after ramping up a bit, and it was arguably a better bulk since it didn't even require ally minions to die and it had Bullseye. Yes, Bullseye. Finally, the last set of the game. I will mainly focus on like the year after it came out, since obviously there's a lot of time between when it came out and today. Aside from a few new meta decks that had never seen plays, most of the cards in this set simply made old decks better. So for starters, here are some of the decks that got improvements thanks to the new cards. Mustache Monument came out and it used to cost only 2 brains, not to mention that Valkyrie still costed 3 brains back then.
Perfectly balanced.
So obviously that deck was back again. Also around this time, Bulk Trickster Hybrid started being a thing, since Mustache Monument was basically a better Lurch for launch, since you didn't even need to wait through the trick phase to OTK your opponent. Plus it worked with both win conditions. Little Buddy and Allosaurus also helped a bit in making heal decks better again. Velociraptor Hunter was somewhat decent in bind clone decks. Aside from that, we saw the reintroduction of berries into the meta, which hadn't been good since ever, with Strawberry and Sojourn Strongberry. But then they got nerfed into the ground, with even Shelfshroom getting hit in the crossfire. Now that we have gotten to the end, here are some other decks / cards that I didn't mention before due to reasons. First of all, legendary spam cards. These have obviously always been meta since legendaries equal good, but since they are boring, we're just gonna ignore them. Well, I will just say that the Rose deck is especially annoying and that's about it. As for other things, this got not. Personally, I never thought it was particularly incredible, which is why I didn't include it, but since it got nerfed in the last balance change ever, because it had high win rates, then it must have been good, I suppose? Anyways, that would be all for the video. Again, if you think I missed a card or deck you think I should have mentioned, leave a comment, and thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe, or something. Anyway, bye bye.